On the night of October 24th, 1890, a woman was seen pushing a baby pram around the streets of North London. It was such an ordinary sight that, save perhaps for the lateness of the hour, no one would have looked twice. Hours later, the body of a young woman would be found atop a pile of garbage at Crossfield Road in Hampstead. Battered, bloody, brutally murdered. A baby pram would be found a few hours later, about a mile away. Empty, but ominously covered in blood. Welcome back to Victorian True Crime, a series devoted to the sensational criminal cases that defined an era obsessed with civility, sin, and spectacle. Not yet sure whether the two incidents were connected, but concerned all the same, police immediately set to work. But the identification of a victim, usually the first vital clue in any murder investigation, was a little bit trickier in the 19th century. With no idea who their victim was, police did what they normally did in Victorian London when they needed help identifying a body. They enlisted the press for help, releasing details about the victim and the grim circumstances in hopes that someone would come forward and make an identification. By morning, news of the unknown murdered woman in Hampstead were all over the papers. And as was often the case in Victorian London, the flurry of press did the trick. Over in Camden, on Prince of Wales Road, a young woman named Clara Hogg would read the papers and find herself instantly overcome by a sick feeling of dread. Clara Hogg lived in a house with her mother, her brother Frank, her sister-in-law Phoebe, and her new baby niece Tiggy. That morning she had been particularly anxious because the afternoon before, her sister-in-law had taken the baby on a stroll and had never returned home. Frank Hogg worked as a mover, and he had to leave very early in the morning for a job out of town. Equally anxious about his wife and daughter, but unable to miss work, he asked Clara to make inquiries in his absence. Earlier in the morning, Clara had gone to Priory Street to the house of a family friend named Mary Piercy. Mary was a close friend of the family and a frequent visitor at the Hogg household. Likewise, Phoebe was known to call at Mary's from time to time and occasionally even stay the night. So Clara thought it was possible that Phoebe and Tiggy had called on Mary the day before and ended up staying for the evening. When asked, Mary assured Clara that she had not seen Phoebe or Tiggy, but she was concerned enough to accompany Clara back to the family home to make herself useful in the search. It was there, later in the morning, that the two women saw the newspaper articles. After reading the details, Clara felt certain that the victim must be her sister-in-law, Phoebe. Trying to calm her, Mary advised Clara not to jump to conclusions and suggested that they wait until Frank got home before they made any moves. Unable to contain her dread, however, Clara eventually insisted that they go to the police station themselves. When they were shown the body, Mary breathed a sigh of relief. "Oh, it is not her," she exclaimed. Clara was not so sure. Though she admitted that she couldn't recognize the face due to its battered, bloody condition, she thought she did recognize the clothes. It was only after the face was washed of all the blood that Clara staggered back in horror. "Oh God, it is her," Clara wailed, reaching for her sister-in-law's hand. Mary then became extremely agitated. "Do not touch her," she shrieked, pulling Clara back. Alarmed at her friend's distressed reaction, Clara sent Mary from the room and made the official identification. The murdered woman was indeed Phoebe Hogg. Clara and Mary then went to another station where they positively identified the pram. Tiggy, however, was still nowhere to be found. Of course, as the husband, Frank Hogg was suspected right away, but it was quickly established that he had a pretty airtight alibi for the time of his wife's murder. The entire day of October 24th, he had been out of town on a moving job, and his whereabouts could be confirmed by several of his colleagues. The following day, there was more horrifying news. The body of a baby girl was found in Finchley. This was very sadly identified as Tiggy. By this point, at least, the police were not without clues. Clara and her mother recalled that Phoebe had received a mysterious note on the afternoon of October 24th, a note that had been hand-delivered by an unknown messenger. Though neither had seen who had delivered the note, they both agreed that almost immediately after reading the message, Phoebe had put Tiggy in the pram and left the house. This coincidence of timing could not be ignored. Whatever had been in that note appeared to have induced Phoebe to leave the house, and police felt certain that identifying the writer of the note would lead them to a person of interest, or a suspect, perhaps even the killer himself. Police again enlisted the press to call for any information regarding this mysterious messenger. And once again, it worked. A 12-year-old neighbor boy named William Holmes came forward, and what he had to tell would dramatically alter the trajectory of the investigation. The 12-year-old neighbor boy told police that he had been the one who delivered the note to the Hogg household that Friday. And though he did not know what the message had contained, he could vividly remember the person who had asked him to deliver it. Turns out it was a young woman, whom he could describe in great detail, and who, he recalled, said she lived on Priory Street. When faced with an identification lineup, 12-year-old William pointed her out without hesitation. It was Mary Piercy. Police at once descended on her home at number 2 Priory Street, and when they did, they found blood everywhere, splattered on the walls, the furniture, even the ceiling. When asked to account for the bloody scene, Mary calmly explained that she had been, quote, killing mice, that's all. I'm sure it will come as a shock to absolutely no one that it was most definitely not animal blood. Mary Piercy was arrested on the spot. The full, horrifying story unraveled quickly after that. Turns out Mary Piercy was a lot closer to the Hogg family than even they knew. Though innocent of the murder of his wife and daughter, Frank Hogg was guilty of one thing: adultery. As it was soon discovered, Frank and Mary had been having a very serious affair for over 2 years. In fact, it had been because of her blatant cheating with Frank that Mary's first partner and common-law husband, John Piercy, had broken off the relationship and kicked her out of the house 2 years prior. And from what I gleaned from the sources, and there are quite a lot because, like I said, the Victorians loved this shit, Mary was quite the intense weirdo. She insinuated herself into the lives of the Hogg family, enthusiastically befriending Frank's sister and mother, and especially his wife Phoebe, whom she would often invite around for tea without Frank's knowledge. A previous year, she had actually insisted that Frank and Phoebe stay with her for Christmas. Earlier that same year, Phoebe had fallen seriously ill, and it was Mary who took it upon herself to be her personal nurse. For weeks, she was over at the Hogg household every day, nursing Phoebe back to health. And all the while, Mary and Frank kept up their regular meetings, with Mary writing Frank dozens upon dozens of love letters, many of which would be read aloud in court. The trial that followed was pure Victorian spectacle. Crowds swarmed the Old Bailey, fighting for places in the galleries to see the Camden murderess. Mary never confessed, so what exactly happened that afternoon at number 2 Priory Street could only be pieced together by the crime scene and the blood that was left behind. I'm not sure if she simply didn't have enough time or if she thought it wasn't necessary, but Mary had done a very poor job of cleaning up. A non-existent job of cleaning up. The parlor and kitchen looked as if a slaughter had taken place. Investigators believe that when Phoebe arrived, presumably for tea, Mary had attacked her almost immediately, likely striking her on the head with a heavy fire poker or perhaps a flat iron. The blow was so violent that blood had sprayed 8 feet across the room. After striking her on the head, they believed that Mary cut Phoebe's throat with a carving knife. When baby Tiggy began to cry, Mary turned her attention to her. The infant's body later showed ligature marks around the neck, suggesting that she had likely been strangled with a cord or wire. Afterward, Piercy cleaned herself up as best she could, bundled the bodies in cloth, and loaded them into the baby pram Phoebe had brought with her. Sometime after dark, she ventured out, wheeling the pram across North London. She first dumped Phoebe's body on that garbage pile in Hampstead before abandoning the pram and finally disposing of Tiggy's body in Finchley. Witnesses would later recall seeing a woman that night pushing a pram, quote, walking quick and steady, her face veiled, her step firm. Despite maintaining her innocence throughout, the jury fairly easily found Mary guilty. Mary Piercy was hanged at Newgate Prison on December 23, 1890. Her case, which had generated extraordinary public interest and horror, would continue to haunt London for decades, up until the present day. The noose which had been used to hang her was preserved and is now kept in the Crime Museum at New Scotland Yard. Madame Tussauds Wax Museum of London made a waxed figure of the infamous Mary Piercy for their Chamber of Horror exhibit. They also purchased the pram, as well as the entire contents of Mary's kitchen. The exhibit drew record crowds. In life, Mary Piercy seemed ordinary, a woman of quiet manners and polite sociability. And maybe that's what frightened Victorians the most. They called her a monster, a fiend, the female Ripper. But perhaps most frightening of all was just how deftly such a monster could conceal herself behind a mask of Victorian propriety and civility, warmly welcoming you into her home, serving you tea, an instant before doing the unthinkable.